Hello, I'm Vicki Haddock, Authentic Leadership Coach, and today I'd like to welcome you to my new series, which is Coaching Conversations with my client, Emma. Emma and I have been working together for a little over 2 years, and we began our conversations supporting her around her role at work, and those conversations eventually evolved into topics around parenting, transitions, and healing from the past. So often our conversations reflected topics that are on the minds of so many that I speak with. And I always was just feeling like, wow, if we could just capture these conversations and others could listen in, what an impact it would make. And eventually, Emma and I agreed to record our conversations. And we hope it's our combined desire that they are a service to those who find their way here and listen to these recordings. They are audio only to maintain Emma's privacy. However, other than that, we've really worked to bring you very typical, transparent, and authentic coaching conversations. I want to thank Emma for being willing to share her life in this way. And it's our hope that you will be inspired and encouraged to make some needed changes in your own life because of these conversations. Now, let's listen in. Well, welcome back to our conversation this week. And before we dive into the depth of our new conversation today, I'd love to just check in with you. In our last conversation, we really kind of went deep in helping you think about regulating your nervous system, especially around all the uncertainty in the world right now was kind of the big topic of our last conversation. And so I want to check in with you, see, how did that go for you?
First of all, I really appreciate you checking in. It has been a lot of grounding throughout my day and reminding myself that I am held by the earth at every moment,
Mhm.
along with some like longer grounding sessions. But it has been a really wonderful reminder that I am the rock and that I am I am held and I am stable. And every time I feel a little wibble wobbly and like up here in my head and like I'm being blown around, it's like, no, I feel my feet on the floor. I feel my butt on my seat
Mhm.
and remind myself that I am stable. And it has been a really beautiful practice and something that's ongoing. I want to add more like longer sessions throughout my day because every time I do it, I'm reminded at how much better I feel afterwards, how more prepared I feel to tackle what's next. And like we've done positive intelligence and just like I can do it whenever I need to. I can do it right now. And it's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, for those who are listening along who hear you say grounding, now I heard a few things, a few deeper descriptions in there. I heard you say I felt my butt on my chair, my feet on the floor, but what does grounding actually look like for you?
It is really simple for me. It can be really simple and it can be more complicated. So when I'm doing it in the moment, it really is like focusing on gravity, focusing on where my body meets contact with the earth. And I mean, it would be great if I could put my feet in the earth. I have 12 inches of snow on the ground right now, so I will not be doing that. But if I'm in the house and I'm filling up the tea kettle, I feel my feet, feel all the minute places on my feet that I'm being held, and I am grateful for it. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my body and I'm not in my head.
Ah,
Sometimes I imagine that I'm a tree. and then I have roots. And I feel and I imagine roots growing out of my feet into
Hmm.
the earth, into the soil. I go further than that, but it is that's the like big groundings that I do.
Okay, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing such practical examples, because I think that just helps people to connect with what does that actually mean? And it reminds me of another word. It's just presence, right? It's bringing back. And I love how you said I'm actually in my body, because I think that we don't even realize how much of the time we live in our head and we're actually disconnected from what's happening with the rest of our body. And I know one of my practices, and a practice I often use during coaching conversations, I think we've used it in our conversations, is to just, take a physical scan of the body and see like what's going on here right now. There's a sore
Yes.
muscle. How can you bring some love and kindness to it?
Hmm. Yeah, we
Yeah.
are so often. I'm in my head all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just
Yeah.
catching that.
Yeah. I catch it way quicker than I used to. Um,
Hmm.
but I even still find sneaky ways that I didn't recognize before was like a way of getting like trapped or stuck in my head again. And then I see that trap. And my most recent one that I've spotted is around decision making. It's like getting this in a loop of two decisions and going back and forth and trying to, justify each side of that. And, half of me wants this one and half of me wants this one. And then I get, stuck in this loop. And I was just thinking as you were speaking about how, I mean, when I do that, I'm just totally stuck in my head. And the way out of it is really to get out of the loop. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And you're right. It is a process of catching it quicker, but it's so easy to get trapped.
Well, with that, let's transition into our conversation today. What's active and alive in your world today?
I think this is actually a the next step in the conversation from last week. And it's also an evolution of my journey, of like the things, the saboteurs in my life. And I see my hyperachiever more now. I think it's always been there. It has just been a lower priority on my list. Um, so both of my children were home yesterday, and the entire time I was supposed to be hanging out with them, I was like, man, I should be at work. Work needs me. I need to be there providing shareholder value. I don't want that. I'm actually quite tired of providing shareholder value, but it does let me live a nice life. And what I want to do is shift my perspective, shift my mindset around work, around getting an income to be it's not such an outsized portion of what's in my brain all the time. I mean, I don't mind thinking about work occasionally when my laptop is closed because I mean, subconsciously solving problems, like that's fine for me. But like
Mm-hmm.
feeling guilty for not working all the time, like I have been programmed to feel this way, and I want to deprogram myself now.
Oh, I think it's a very classic conundrum. I think back to my own journey with this, journey with other people that I've coached, where this sometimes there's this essence of when you are working, and I don't know if this is true for you, you didn't say this, but sometimes when you are working, you're feeling guilty that you're not available for your family. And then in
Uh-huh.
these moments where your kids were home sick, and you have the opportunity to check out of work and be with them, there's the reverse of that. And so it's like it can come at you from either side.
Yes, it does come at me while I'm at work. I'm like, wow, I wish I could be doing literally anything else. And when I'm not working, I'm like, wow, I should be working now.
Yeah. You referenced the hyperachiever, and the hyperachiever through the lens of positive intelligence. With positive intelligence is simply just a framework for helping us recognize when we're in our sage wisdom and when we're in thinking patterns that kind of trip us up and get us trapped. And the hyperachiever, as you referenced, is one of those saboteurs. So what do you know about the hyperachiever? Let's just be descriptive of what does that mean for you?
My hyperachiever wants to be doing. If I am not doing, I am not worthy. Like my worth is directly tied to my output. So when I'm having a tough day at work and I'm just not in it to win it and my output's really small, like wow, I didn't doesn't feel good in my body. When I recently moved from an individual contributor role where it's very task-based to a very managerial role. So a lot of my time is just talking. I don't have a lot of output anyway. That feels kind of crummy sometimes. So it's very much tied to task-based output where I can show someone that I did a thing. And then coming back and be like, wow, you did a great job.
It's validating.
Yes, external validation rather than internal validation of good job, ma'am.
Yeah. So we pulled a couple threads out here as you were speaking. There's this thread of I equate my value and worth to what I produce. I wonder, how do you see that reinforced from the society around you?
Oh, it's everywhere. I mean, our capitalistic society is all about like putting in the hours, building things, being present at a job for the sake of being present, like physically there. I mean, we teach it to our children in schools with homework, with grades, testing.
I think there's another layer of this, especially when it's tied to your work. It's tied to your economic stability.
100% yes. It is directly tied to me being able to support myself, my family, and the life that we currently enjoy. It's a scarcity mindset.
Say more.
The the thought that if I don't produce, I won't have a job. I won't be able to pay my mortgage, buy groceries, buy gas, and that there is no other opportunity out there that would give me that level of life.
So that actually sounds like a pretty base survival instinct.
It absolutely is.
So, at the simplest surface of this, we could say that when you're at rest, there's a part of you who is fearful that your very survival around food and housing and basic needs is not going to be met because you are at rest.
Never thought about it that way, but yes.
Let's look at it from the flip side. What messages have you noticed about rest? And when I say noticed about rest, think about, back from maybe your childhood forward about what were the messages that you were told, heard,
I
observed?
distinctly remember being told that I was lazy when I was not doing. Like, I should be cleaning. I should be contributing to the household. I should be doing anything other than being a kid playing. Were there opportunities for that? Absolutely. But the thing that I remember that my nervous system remembers is that rest is laziness. I do. I have gotten better at about rest, but clearly there's still some stuff there.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the power, and I'm glad that you brought this up because this is the power of understanding the the way our nervous system was initially programmed. And I think that we don't it's harder for us to grasp this concept when it's our nervous system. But let's take it to something like learning a foreign language. Have you ever learned a foreign language or
I took Latin for
okay?
many years.
Mhm. And could you speak Latin with me right now if I had the ability to do that?
Not a bit.
Mhm. And were you at any point in time during your studies of Latin able to hold a really fluent conversation with someone in Latin?
Not conversationally, but I was quite good at translating texts.
Okay. So there was elements of that you really were strong in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the reason I use language is because it's easy for us to understand that our dominant language that was programmed in us from childhood, it's easy for us to understand and see how difficult it is to shift away from that and to operate in another
Hmm.
language. And it's always, even for people, I mean, I have friends who have fluently existed in English for much of their life, but yet when they're tired or stressed or whatever, their brain wants to go back to their native language. And that's the same with our nervous system. So rest equals laziness is that baseline programming that your nervous system learned this is true.
Hmm.
But I wonder what was even beyond that. What was the consequence of being lazy?
Got yelled at.
Mm-hmm.
I
So there
got
was punishment.
punished. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that punishment, I mean, was there any kind of repercussions that you remember specifically around that punishment?
It was I was forced to do the thing that they wanted me to do, which was clean my room, which was put stuff away, which was help outside in the yard. It was a what I want you to do is more important than the thing that you want to do.
Okay. So rest equals having to do something that I don't really want to do as a punishment for rest.
Hmm.
And as I hear, that's what your nervous system learned, that if I want to rest, I can expect that I'm going to have to do things that I don't want to do.
Hmm.
How does all of this tie to what happened yesterday for you?
It's like if I can preempt that punishment and like outsmart it somehow of like, oh, if I could just do this thing, then I can rest. Ha ha ha. That's a lie. There is no rest.
Yeah. Is there an ever and never, is there ever an end to the things that we should do that would actually get us to the point of rest?
No, absolutely not. It's there, the bar is always moving. The goalposts are never in reach. It is a lie that there is an end goal. And like I
Mm-mm.
say this and I'm like, you know this. Happiness is now. Happiness is not in the future. This is just another tale of that, just in the sake of rest and productivity and heavy air quotations.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can begin to see how strongly the conditioning of the culture that you grew up in, the society that you currently live in, impacts these two messages. So we have a foundation that says rest is dangerous and lazy and leads to punishment. And then we have a consistent reinforcement of that from the opposite direction, that the only time you have any worth is when you're doing things, and maybe in particular things you don't really want to be doing.
Absolutely. It's like the odds have been stacked against me.
Yeah. This is also what we call a double bind. It's it's something that your nervous system was taught was true, but isn't really true.
How do we get out of it? How do we shift the perspective, shift the mindset, recondition the nervous system?
Do you know anybody that runs marathons?
I do know someone who runs marathons.
Mm-hmm. And do they run 24/7?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, how much, if you know them well enough to know their their practice schedule, how much do they run?
I don't know them that well, but what I believe is their training schedule is like, a 5K a couple of times a week.
Yeah. Yeah. And do they sleep at night?
Sure do.
So I love to use an example like this because it makes total sense to our brain that we couldn't expect ourselves to run 24/7. We couldn't even expect ourselves to run like 16 hours a day. It also helps to emphasize the purpose that rest serves.
I mean, it's important for our brains, our bodies, our stress levels. It's super duper important.
Yeah. It's the way that we decompress, we process difficult emotions. It's the way that the play that, I mean, if you think about a child who is stressed out, one of the ways they help themselves decompress, maybe they either take a nap or they they move around a lot and get activity, and they're able to process those things. I mean, rest and downtime is how our immune system has to rejuvenate. It's the time when the dead cells get kind of cleansed and taken out of our body.
It, the rest and like actually feeling rested when I rest, it has been on my mind for quite some time now. And I thought that maybe I had gotten there, and clearly I got some work to do.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one of the ways we can have some energy leaks, some silent energy leaks in our system. Because when we
Yes.
haven't fully fleshed out these things and seen the truth of them to the fullest extent, they can be, they can be like a leaky toilet.
Mhm.
So, where I'm living at right now in Mexico, um, so most of the houses in Mexico have a water holding tank on the roof. And that's where the daily water supply comes from. And there's typically some sort of pump system that pumps that water up in either from a well or from a local water supply, or sometimes a truck has to bring that water and fill the reservoir. But two of the last three places I've lived, there was a leaky toilet. And I was traveling with a friend for a little bit, and the water tank in the place we were staying drained like in 24 hours, and it really should be like at least a 3 to 5 day supply of water. And I said, I think that there's a problem with the toilet. And she's like, oh, a toilet wouldn't run that much water out. And I'm like, I kind of think it would, because when there's a constant leak, nobody's seeing it, nobody's paying attention to it, but it's this constant drain. And so that happened to be true at that place. But in that case, we could actually hear the toilet, running a little bit. And then the place where I'm at now, there's also a leak in the toilet. And particular happens to be the one that is associated with my living space. And I I'm pretty keen and attuned to spotting those leaks because I do know that they can cause a lot of drain, but I didn't see it. And it wasn't until, the tank kept draining down and having to be refilled, and we're, trying to diagnose where this is coming from. And it got me thinking about the more aware we become, we can spot those noisy leaks, right? You you're getting much better at spotting the noisy leaks. And what our mind does is, as we spot the noisy leaks or those are removed, what is more difficult to spot is the silent or the subtle leaks and drains of energy. Now, I had referenced back at the beginning of our conversation how I've been thinking about my own mind looping pattern around decision making. And as I was sitting with that, and I'm always curious about, how does this experience with the toilet, how does that reflect back into what's actually happening in my own world? Because I think there's always some curiosity or lesson there. And I never had spotted how energy draining that mind looping pattern is for me around decision making. And but I've become much more aware of that in the last few months. And even being aware of it, I found myself kind of engaged in a bigger version of it that I was well, I'm evaluating all my decisions. Well, no, I'm not. It's just a bigger version of looping around a few
Mhm.
things. And when I could see that and then take myself out of that, my energy level poof, comes back up. And it's like plugging the leak. So, all of that analogy to say, there's something about what's happening for you still here, even though you've been much better at spotting it, that's a subtle pattern running in the background that's draining energy.
As you were talking through all that, I'm like, you're right. I am so tired at the end of the day. I am so low energy, and it feels like dragging my body up from the depths at the end of the day to even try to enjoy myself with my hobbies at the end of the day in the short a period of time that I do have. And just trying to think of like subtle patterns in my life. I do think it is running commentary in my head around what I should be doing and how I am not enough in any scenario. So I'm constantly running myself ragged, trying to be enough, whether I'm resting or working, that I can't enjoy the damn thing that I'm doing.
Yeah. But as you describe that, what I hear is that you have logged into that thought pattern, and all of you is like circling in that thought pattern.
Yes.
So let's let's do something with that for a second. If you could imagine what that loop looks like in your brain. Now, for me, I have a picture in my brain of old wagon trail wagon ruts in Western Nebraska that were super deep, and then the sand has filled them in. And I can just imagine like this big loop in my brain that like my thought just kind of circles around that deep loop. Now, because I've gotten that image to go with that, when I recognize that thought pattern going on, I can log out of it. Even if it is at play, I can say, oh, I see that thought pattern, which I want to talk to you a minute about diagramming patterns, because this is helpful for this. That thought pattern is like that wagon wheel running in that rut over and over again.
Mine's a hamster wheel. That's what it
Okay.
feels like in my body.
Yeah. So you can begin to see, oh, when we can bring presence to the thought pattern of the hamster wheel, now I can disconnect from it. I can still see the hamster running there over on the wheel, but I can recognize, oh, that thought pattern is just a hamster running on a wheel, and it only ever runs me ragged.
Hmm. I'm imagining myself running on the wheel and like looking at it with a lot of empathy as well. But like I can see myself distancing. Like I think at what you told me, like our stories, we could pull back and look at them like movies.
Yes.
It's like that,
Yeah.
distancing myself as a, like I'm viewing it like a movie.
Yeah. And when you're doing that, you can bring presence and compassion to that part of you that is caught in this wheel, in this exhausting loop.
It is remarkably helpful just to like as a starting point of recognizing thought patterns and removing myself from them.
Yeah. This is where I love to diagram patterns. It's something that's helpful for me because it makes me more aware, and you might experiment this with yourself. So I typically get a piece of paper and all my colored pens, or I'm learning to do this on my iPad with my pencil. um, but I see what triggers the thing, and then I mark that as the trigger. Okay, the trigger was the kids were sick and I needed to be home at work. And then what happens next? I settled in on the couch with them to take care of them. Then the thought came about 30 things I should be doing at work. And then what happened for you? Well, I'm presuming this is how the pattern went. But if we were to do
That's
this,
exactly what happened.
yeah, okay. So after you thought about the 30 things that you should be doing at work, then what happened?
I checked Slack on my phone.
Okay, so now we have a behavior. We could even label that as behavior. I went and I checked Slack. And once you check Slack, then what happened?
I beat myself up for checking Slack
Okay,
instead of being present with my children.
okay. Then I judged myself, beat myself up, and wasn't for not being present. And then what happened?
I put Slack down and I tried to be present with my children.
Okay, so I tried to avoid thinking about work.
But then I came back up again of you should be doing some other things at work. You could be doing some other things at work right now. And there was some resentment for my children being sick.
Okay, this is powerful. Okay, so I should be doing something else. Now I'm resentful that my kids are sick. And then when you feel resentful that your kids are sick, what happens then?
I don't want to be present with them and I want to disassociate and do something that brings me joy, like crocheting. So now I'm actively ignoring my children, trying to soothe myself.
Okay. Yeah. So then we go to an avoiding behavior that's a soothing, comforting behavior. And then what?
My children beg me for attention
Okay.
and I play with them.
Okay. So then we came back and you came to presence with them. I think that's enough of that pattern. But what did you notice as we were doing that whole thing? What did you notice more clearly?
I have a lot of coping mechanisms that I think are trauma responses and just built in from my experiences of how I can soothe myself. And I'm really judgmental, just all the time. Nothing is good enough.
Yeah. So doing this in this way is like seeing each individual bar on your wheel that you're running
Mm-hmm.
on. And when you can see the subtler nuances of it, that helps you to begin to spot it quicker
Mm-hmm.
and to not take it so seriously anymore. Because this is something a very deeply ingrained pattern in you. And the more you double down on why it's bad or why it shouldn't be, it's almost like that energizes the pattern.
What you focus on grows.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you resist persists.
That is such a great addendum to that. I will be saying that to myself
There's
forever.
another but there's another part of that, and that is what you embrace, you can erase. Or let's just say what you embrace, you can dissolve. So the whole thing is about seeing that pattern and bringing presence to it and remembering you are not your patterns.
I have said I am not my thoughts, and I like I am not my patterns a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more you see how those patterns get you trapped and you feel the difference between being free and being trapped, it helps us to more quickly recognize those patterns and step out of them.
The thing that's coming through to me right now is these have been ingrained in my body for my lifetime, and it's not going to be a quick fix, get out of them, get out of jail free card. This is going to be an ongoing practice to release these patterns from my mind and my body.
Absolutely. But when you can remove the judgment of that, that's what frees you. So just
Yes.
like the person who's existed in a second language sometimes goes back or needs to go back to their primary language, they don't have to judge themselves for doing that. They also, you can also just recognize that that is it can move into being just an echo, right? It when the emotion and the judgment is gone from it, then it's just something that we spot and we can move out of it quicker.
Yes. Oh, so delightful.
Let's bring this back as we wrap up to the guilt piece of feeling guilty at work, guilty at home. And how would you translate our conversation into what you have discovered around that today?
It all feels like manufactured drama from that I've put on myself, but also through the experience, like the very real experiences that I had. And I am feeling a lot more empathetic to that little girl who did the best she could to survive. And I am not my patterns. And I can shift this energy, gosh darn it.
Yeah, yeah. think you already have shifted a lot of energy just in our conversation today.
I feel a lot lighter. I feel like, I don't know, I got this warm, tingly feeling in my belly right now.
Mm,
Clearing out some cobwebs.
yeah. Be with that for a minute. What does that freedom or freer space feel like?
Opportunity. It, you know what? I said freeing cobwebs. It feels like I'm shining a light on a place that has been really dark. And I am seeing things from a new perspective now. And it feels like an releasing things to make space for something new. I don't know what that new thing is yet, and I'm not going to presume to know what it is, but this does feel like a releasing of something. Releasing and integrating. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Anything else for today, or does that bring us to a good space?
Feels good to me.
Right. I'll see you next time. And all the best in bringing presence to these patterns and allowing them to dissolve a little bit, allowing the sands of the times to blow and fill in the ruts. Thank you for being along until the end of this conversation today. We'd love to have you as a regular listener, so please hit the subscribe button and like this video and check back for the next episode in my conversations with Emma. In the meantime, I'd love to hear what resonated with you most. Leave a comment, and I'll look forward to hearing what sparked in you during this conversation. Also, feel free to share this with a friend, and we appreciate you being along in helping us to bring inspiration and hope and healing to all those who listen. So take care and have a beautiful day.